Please welcome to the stage FBA board member and National Marketing Manager Graybar, Scott Jackson, who will lead our next panel, Light It Up, Innovation, Architecting for Growth.
You guys know I bring the broadband energy with my peeps out there. Kim, who made up the term. So what we're going to do is we're going to get some energy going in here because Fiber Connect, this is day 2. We got about half day tomorrow. So let's get fired up. We're not going to be boring. This panel will be fun. So I'm going to introduce everyone and give you a little history and a little something about them. So the first, Bob Whitman, the Vice President of Corning. And what you may not know, you've heard the legend of how the Fiber to the Home Council started. This is one of the 3 guys that started it that eventually became the FBA. Bob Whitman, give him a round of applause. All right. You saw him last year. He was the #1 on the board as the chair, but he's now a former chair. Rode in on a motorcycle. He had to fly in here. He may not be #1 on the board now, but he's still #1 in our hearts. Jimmy Todd, the CEO of Xlink, buddy. All right. And next, Tom McGuire, the CEO of Brightspeed, who's just announced his retirement. This is the very first stop on his farewell tour. And we found out he decided he wanted to compete with Heather Gold for how many times he could retire. Got you, Heather, if you're out there. I can't see you, but I'm hoping you heard that. All right, Tom. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Most recently, you saw Dave Eckert. How did you get on the stage twice? Anyway, it doesn't matter. He about choked on a chicken wing yesterday.
Oh,
but what you may not know is he crashed the Westminster Boys Choir when he was in London. And sang with them. Who does that? None other than David Eckert. David Eckert of Nokia. Yay. Hey, buddy. And introducing me, as you all know, I'm Just Jackson. So, hey, let's get on with this thing. What do you say?
Absolutely.
Let's go for it.
All right. So this panel of Light It Up Architecture, if anyone read the 50-word description, it breaks down really into about 2 words. It's about team building and processes, so 3 words. And that's what we're going to focus on and how we do this. So obviously, you guys, most people like to hear from network operators. No offense, Bob, David, or myself, right, as vendors. So we're going to start with Tom and then Jimmy and kind of feed into that. So Tom, since this is the first stop on your farewell tour, you get the honor of having the first question. So you're building teams. You've got a white paper that came out, copper retirements. You've also got, hey, how do you reduce splice time? How do you put the teams together? There's labor shortages in the industry. So let's start with the team building that you at Brightspeed do, and then we'll move on.
Interestingly, we brought in a bunch of ringers when we were first approached to do this project. Believe it or not, it's going on 6 years at this point. The company's been around for about 2.5 years. So I kind of stacked the deck a little bit. There were 3 of us, Bob Mudge, Chris Krieger, and myself, that started the company right from the get-go. And so we brought in some people that we thought could do a good job, that kind of knew what they were going. It was kind of a unique experience because it was unique for me because I got to pick people I liked to work with. So we had a kind of a no assholes rule coming right out of the gate. So that worked out rather well for us. And so we looked at the landscape and tried to figure out what we needed to do in order to succeed in the long run. And so it's kind of interesting to me. I've heard a lot of people say, well, hey, we anticipate we're going to have a shortage of this or we're going to have a dearth of that. And so we tried to put together a network or a network design that avoided the pitfalls, trying to figure out how to fix things after the fact. So we got together with some key providers, some of the folks that are here today, to try to figure out how we could stitch together a network that will be successful in the future. At the same time, we started focusing on some of the things that we could do to retire the copper infrastructure. I joked at one panel that I came out of retirement to get copper into retirement, and I think we've made some considerable progress in that regard. But I do note that it was just last week that Telefonica announced that they shut down their copper network completely, and which I think is pretty significant. We still have a pretty large amount of copper that's out there. I think McKinsey at one point determined that about 50% of OpEx is just maintaining the copper infrastructure. And imagine what we could do to build out more fiber if we shut that down. Mm-hmm. So again, it's bringing in people that we know what they're doing, making sure that they're engaged throughout the entire process, and trying to figure out how to avoid the pothole as opposed to trying to figure out how to change the flat after we hit it. So.
Nice, awesome. So I see Bob Whitman down there, which I'm going to Jimmy next, but he just can't wait because Corning's right there in it, helping with all the labor-saving stuff that Tom just said. So we're teeing it up. He's ready to go. I can see it, man. But Jimmy, you have a similar thing. You got rural topographies. You're building core teams, and obviously we're going to table. I'll give a little foreshadowing to the audience. You know, AI, machine learning. You led our precision agriculture, right? So we'll go into that a little later. But the core competencies and kind of what you're doing to build the future of high-speed internet in your communities and the team building.
So I was very fortunate when I came to Nextech, and I inherited a fantastic team. We've been in business now for almost 75 years. And, you know, we're a cooperative that operates in a very rural area. So, you know, what we did is a lot of cases we have to grow our own, which means bringing young people in, giving them a reason to want to come work for us, and then, you know, introducing them to the company either through like a help desk role or a technician intern position, things like that. And then from there, we have opportunities for them to grow and expand and truly build a career, whether it be staying in like field services or going into the IT side of our business. And, you know, we're fortunate enough that because of being where we are, we started providing like the video and advertising and media side of things because our small businesses and then our peers needed help with that. So little by little, from traditional services to the IT side of things to the media and marketing, those are things that we just really grew from the ground up with entry-level people. We fortunately have a college that's in Hayes, and so we had the ability to bring in college students that became interns, became entry-level people, and we've been very fortunate to keep a lot of those and transition them into long-term employees. Finding ways to meet the needs of our customers and evolving that way, that's always been kind of what we focused on.
Awesome. So obviously you own the whole thing, both you and Tom, and any network operator owns the whole thing, but it's about teamwork and building processes. So now we're in other roles and responsibilities. Graybar has their own, Nokia, and Bob. Bob, you're next up because they just hit on so much. And when I think Corning, believe it or not, I think product, but I think more labor savings. That's what, and we've got labor shortages and building teams, and that's what I think of when I think of Corning anyway, with pre-connectorization, et cetera. So Bob, fire away.
Thank you. So I'm glad Tom's here because when you talk about teamwork, this is how it started, right? You talked about those pre-connectorized solutions. We invented that 24 years ago, something like that. And, you know, Tom was a big part of that. And the teamwork aspect is you have a challenge, you need to scale, you need to make, you know, you have unskilled workforce, right? Let's figure out how to innovate that together and solve that challenge. And that's what we did, right? 20 some odd years later, now we're tailoring solutions for the specific needs of what Brightspeed is doing. And so that requires teamwork, and it requires people to be open, sharing the challenges, and that's where we do our best work. And now as we think about, all right, what's coming next? It's to the rural, hard to reach places. And I see my friends here in the front row. We have a rural advisory council where we learn from some of these providers what their unique challenges are in the rural space. And then we're trying to tailor solutions for the low density, hard to reach locations. And what it boils down to is what was said here is the teamwork. You cannot innovate in a bubble, right? You need to have deep engagement with the players that are actually trying to build these networks to help them with the challenges they have.
It was kind of interesting when we were first approached by Apollo. We pulled together a couple of folks. Lee Hicks was one of them, who is a person that is very familiar with Corning. But it was kind of interesting. We showed up at their doorstep one day and said, it was 3 of us, and we said, hey, we want to build 3.5 million lines with fiber. And this is during, you know, the height. I remember Eric Marinakis, who's floating around out here someplace, was getting calls from a provider who was willing to offer 10% more than anybody else just to get their hands on fiber. And so, but it's the relationships and the teamwork. When we sat there and said, this is what our plan was, we sat down, we figured it out, and we were able to get things going in a pretty short order. So to me, one of the things that we don't talk about in the industry is the relationships that are in the industry, which is why I think events like this are super powerful, because you get to meet people and share experiences and come up with new solutions, which is pretty cool.
Awesome. Well, now it's the segue. So let's talk about core competencies in technology, because Nokia's, they got some good products, right? They're 10 gig PON, 25 gig PON, and the EPB thing that you have going, and I think you got one in rural Oklahoma as well. So we'll stay to core competencies and your roles in team building on the future, because there's the core business and there's what's the business going to look like later, that's where we're headed. So you lead that off, and then please just catch up, Jimmy and
Absolutely.
Tom.
Yes, I could definitely kick off that part of the discussion. I mean, look, Nokia is rooted very much in technology, innovation, pushing the envelope forward. One of the things, obviously, you see the bits and the bytes going faster and faster and faster. And again, we build these networks not for today, but we build them for the next generation, the generation to come. And we want to ensure that any application that's going to be maybe unforeseen can actually still be applied to that. And so we always are pushing the envelope of speeds. You hear the 10 gig, 25 gig, 50 gig, and even plus to 100 gig. I mean, we're looking even beyond to see how much capacity we can get out of this fiber network. But it's not just the bits and the bytes that we're also pushing on the envelope. And you heard just on stage just a moment ago about the AI, push. And again, AI is kind of this buzzword that we all talk about. And again, this is where Gary mentioned this task force working group that we have within FBA. Myself and Fred Arnold and Justin from Nextech are running this. And so again, welcome everyone to participate for those members here. But one of the things that we're looking at doing is, how does AI actually impact the fiber network? And how does the fiber network impact AI? And one of the things that we've done at Nokia and is really push on those key pieces of components that enable AI workloads to be consumed by the network. So intent-based networking is a fundamental aspect of how you actually onboard your workloads onto to AI when it comes to reducing the OpEx. And so we see different types of ownership models happening in the industry, where you now have these netcos coming in. I mean, even we're talking about Brightspeed and Apollo, and again, the goal is to push as much as you can the OpEx to zero, and that's the thing we're starting to see happening here. So again, we're bringing those innovations in. So whether it's intent-based networking, whether it's 25 gig and 100 gig, as well as looking at with Wi-Fi 7 and making sure that again, whole home coverage, residential, commercial, enterprise can actually be addressed as well with this fiber net. Because again, we're just tapping the tip of what fiber can actually bring.
Awesome.
When you think about AI, and it's such a complex concept, right? So much goes into it, but yet the goal of it is to simplify things, automate more things, help you be more proactive in trouble resolution, so that customer experience just continues to get better. And finding new ways to employ that new technology, that new way of thinking, if you will, is something that I think we'll see that fiber allows us to do better than any other network topology out there. And so the potential for where AI can go, not only from what we're doing in our central offices, but all the way to the home and business, is just going to exponentially increase. And that's the exciting thing that I look forward to seeing. How do we use it to get better?
I think it's critical. I agree with these guys completely. Simplicity is the key. One way to manage down OpEx is to get the customers involved in helping to solve their own problems. That's where AI comes into play. Plug-and-play technologies is something that also helps us, doing a lot of self-installs on the second time around installation. And the reason I think it's imperative, not only because it helps bring OpEx down and keeps the Apollo guys happy, but because of the competition that we have hovering out there, literally hovering out there, everything they do is all self-service. And so there aren't a lot of people in trucks and tools. You call somebody to help, you really don't get anybody to help because everything is automated. I think we need to get there as quickly as possible, because a lot of the competition that we face today, certainly the competition we face in the future, will have that level of AI, have that level of simplicity already built into that. So we're catching up a little bit.
So I'm going to throw it up, and for just about anyone, right? This is about team building and processes, and we just hit on AI, which is the future. Gary's mentioned quantum. You guys are supporting the Quantum Lab by EPB, right? So putting teams together, because how do you monetize that in the future? How are you going to deploy? What are you going to do? So it's open. If anyone wants to say something, how do you put a team
Nokia,
together?
I mean, people think of Nokia as the old handsets, right? I mean, the infrastructure, the active pieces, and so forth. But what's increasingly important for us to work in a larger ecosystem is not just, to provide the actives, when the fiber has been built, is actually to be at the very beginning, whether it's with the engineering companies, with the consultants, but to be part of this larger ecosystem to help drive this. Because we actually, we talk about AI, we're looking to ingest, how the fiber is being designed, what's the network look like. Because what we want to do is take that topology and be able to bring it into what we call a digital twin. And so there's multiple digital twins that we can create. And we can then use that to actually do the what-if scenarios about how the networks are going to behave. And so that is a fundamental part that we have to ingest into what we're doing as on the active side of things. So we have to work in these partnerships to be able to go from the birth of a network to the full operations of the network. And it's critical.
Well, it's really cool. So precision ag, I'm going to kind of go in that direction because I find it very interesting. So obviously Graybar, there's various services. That's what we do as part of the team. We did a case study with Corning and Allo goes all across the United States. So there's your team. They might be in Yuma, Arizona, one building or wherever else, right? And that case study is out there, and Gary Bolton's been, he was interviewed and et cetera. So what I found very interesting, and when the precision ag that Jimmy started was 1010, you turn it on a pump, you turn it off a pump, and you think it's a lot of low-speed networking and that LoRa stuff, and there it is. But you know what? We found out, and Corning found out, and they had to get fiber out there in Yuma, Arizona, where all the lettuce is grown in the United States. High-speed cameras cannot download on low-speed networks. And so you need broadband for precision agriculture. It's not just to a point and to a tower. So Jimmy and then Bob, you guys want to, you've been leading that, Jimmy, so.
If you think about, the early days of precision ag, the networks weren't there in rural areas. So your OEMs were using whatever was available, hence satellite and things like that. Now that we have been able, and we need to even do more, pushing fiber to that last mile, to that farm and ranch headquarters, the potential for what precision ag can do is going to continue to evolve. You're still going to have sensors. You're still going to have that low, data type of functionality that is important in managing your inputs, all right? But as you see more technology and ag tech continue to evolve, it's one of those things where you're going to need more, in the future, real-time decision making, whether it's from a camera that's on a boom for a sprayer, or whether it's a drone, and then you've got those abilities to be able to bring that data through a private last acre network to edge computing tied to the cloud, which is all facilitated by fiber. That's the future of where we're going, and you're just going to continue to see that capability grow and grow. Last year we had someone speak, and he said 99% of all the data that we have about farming has happened in the past couple of years. Just think about it. Let that sink in, because there is so much more potential to grow with that, but it requires our fiber networks to get out there and to facilitate those last acre networks that reach across all the farmland and ranch land that is out there.
Yeah, and go ahead, Bob.
No, that's dead on. You need fiber to have these applications, and it's starting to get there. We had Gary up here talking about the need for us to maintain that government funding as fiber, because otherwise you're not going to be able to do these applications. You need that fiber to get out there, and then it's limitless, right? AI today, apparently they're making money already on AI after a couple of years, and it's not all the new applications yet. There's going to be thousands of new applications generated from AI that haven't even started scratching the surface yet. So that's critical. As you get to the rural areas, I'm going to steal a little bit of Scott's thunder here or divert the discussion a little bit. Yes, those are getting built. There's some government funding. There's carriers building there. We are entering the largest deployment era we've ever seen, right? The next 5 years is going to be like the past 20 years in terms of the numbers of homes passed. And so how are we going to keep up with that deployment level? How are we going to get to that deployment level and then maintain it for the next several years? That's going to be the real challenge. And Tom mentioned competition, right? Why is there so many homes getting built? You have government money for rural, you have carriers finishing their territory, and then you have overbuilders that are building on top of fiber networks today. We think as many as half the country could have 2 fiber providers at their house. How are we going to, as an industry, get to the deployment rates needed to meet that demand?
Tom, go ahead.
That's, just to go off that last point, something that's kind of intrigued me is the multiple providers. I mean, coming from a traditional wireline background, you always had either the MSOs, the cable companies, or the ILEC, and now there could be multiple providers out there. I think especially, it kind of struck me if you look at the wireless market, there's multiple wireless networks operating in any particular market at any given time, compared to a traditional wireline mindset of only having a single wireline network and maybe a cable company network. And so one of the things that I've been kind of struggling with is like, how do you create the efficiencies that you need to allow that? Like, what do you do about that, right? Because it was interesting yesterday during one of the executive sessions, one of the folks was presenting, how many homes are left to build, on our current trajectory. We're going to wind up at the end of this year, I think. And then they talked about the redundant build that was going to take place, and the numbers were almost exactly the same. And I'm thinking there's still a lot of households out there that won't have fiber, a lot of areas that won't have fiber. Is there a better way to skin the cat? Is there a better way for us to figure out how we're going to deploy fiber so everybody gets what they need? Because quite frankly, I didn't even think about the stuff that you were talking about, which is extremely important, extremely interesting. So, as an industry, I think we need to kind of take a little bit of a step back and figure out, what's the most effective way for us to compete against some of the other technologies that aren't as robust, aren't as secure as what we're offering today.
Awesome. David?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you saw in the Thought Waves video yesterday, if you were here, one of my colleagues, Peter Vedder, was talking about these fiber networks, and to Jimmy's point, these networks typically will have a wireless component to it, or whether it's Wi-Fi, whether it's LoRa or whatever. And again, it's we're going to have that type of capacity. Again, we're going to have those radio technologies at the very endpoints of it to be able to support all the different applications we have.
Awesome. So we've got about 7.5 minutes or so, and I always like to ask this question. So here we are building teams and processes. We got your core. We've talked about some emerging things. We don't know what's emerging tomorrow. I mean, I remember IoT was all the big word, was the big acronym, and it kind of comes back and goes away again. And I don't know, precision ag, and then AI, and whatever that might be. But as you're thinking in the future, and Tom on his farewell tour here, the first stop, what keeps you up at night? What keeps you up at night on the teams that I'm going to need now and in the future? What's your concerns? Tom, you want to start with that one?
There's a lot of things that keep me up at night these days. Most of them have nothing to do with this. That's what happens when you get older. But anyway, some of the things as I look down, I think we're going to need some new skill sets. We're still going to need the arms and legs and the hands and feet in order to build a network. But then how do you, what's the next level of skill that's necessary to do all the things that we're talking about now? Because, I mean, it's such a quickly evolving ecosystem. There are things that are going to happen tomorrow that no one today can think about, at least in my, in an ILEC world. And so it's like, how do you stay one step ahead of the game? How do you kind of look? Because, things, I used to kid around about the industry when I first started. For those who've been around for a while, everything was dictated. I was back in the AT&T days. Everything was dictated by BSP, Bell System Practices. And one of the things that drew me to the industry was that everything was well documented, very structured, very descriptive. If this happens, this is what you will do. But as I look at that today, we can't be that anymore. We need to be a lot more agile. We need to be a lot quicker in making decisions. And we've done a really good job, at least from an ILEC perspective, of creating this environment, growing people up, as Jimmy mentioned, to get to that old BSP mindset. It's like, how do you evolve the next level of talent to be able to get us to where David was describing, so we could start leveraging some of the new tools and anticipate what's going to happen in the future.
Well, if Deb Kish is in here, I bet you just gave her. She is the vice president of our workforce development at FBA, and her and Todd Jackson, the director. You just gave them a lot. The emerging workforce, not just trying to get people. Wow.
No.
So, Jimmy, go ahead.
If I were to have something that kept me awake, it would probably be regulatory decision making. Operating in a high-cost rural area, federal funding is what allowed us to build the networks that we've built. But when you're in those low-density areas, there's a cost to maintaining and continuing to manage and upgrade those networks. So, considering that, it's one thing to get the fiber built, but it's another thing to make sure that it can continue to be maintained and upgraded to serve, 10, 20, 30 years down the road. The fiber's capable, but it still has cost associated with it. Fortunately, the cost on a fiber network is significantly lower than a fixed wireless network or a copper network, and that's huge. But there's still the regulatory uncertainty is the thing that I probably spend most time worrying about strategically.
Yeah, so on that point, we talk about, in this rural group, we talk a lot about windshield time. I got to get somebody to a home to connect the home. I have to get somebody out there for a repair. It could be a 2-hour drive, right? So you need a network, and it goes back to your regulatory comment. You need a network that is not only reliable, but also easy and simple to repair, quick to repair, right? So this goes back to the why do you want connectors in the network? Because you could just plug it in and be done. You could leave the cable on the ground for a while until somebody comes back and buries it. So, I'm a little concerned about the regulatory framework. I'm also concerned about the workforce, right? So you need people who can splice, can connect the homes, right? And I love our Optic Path program. Corning's done a smaller version of a broadband technician class. We need as many people in this industry helping to build that workforce because it's aging out, right? The copper folks are all going to retire, and you got new folks with a lot of initiative that can become people that can do multiple jobs, not just the one trick pony.
What I would say is, I'm not worried about the technology. We've heard about the power requirements for data centers and so forth. And yes, it's a problem. But again, engineers, as an engineer, I have a tremendous amount of faith that we'll find solutions to those problems. The thing that keeps me up the most at night are tariffs, the application of tariffs. And maybe the tariffs are on, maybe they're off. Maybe it's the finished product, maybe it's the subcomponents. And the reason why it keeps me up at night is because my customers, those who are looking to build networks, they have to plan. They have to figure out what their budget's going to be. They have to figure out their cost of all this capital and how they actually plan for the future, whether it's their own from equity companies or whether it's from the government. They have to figure out what that is. And as soon as you start looking at tariffs, whether it is active equipment, whether it's passives, whether it's backhoes, whether it's whatever equipment you have to buy to actually do this network, subject to these tariffs. And that's what really keeps me up at night.
Well, we didn't plan this, but you couldn't have done a better segue to what I wanted to tell the audience at the end. So putting on my FBA hat, right? I chair the working group for the supply chain, and I just submitted to Gary the next supply chain white paper. We cover a lot of the things you talk about. So we're talking about teams and processes. The FBA also has teams and processes, and they have many working groups that many of you can participate in. And it takes a village, right? Our competitors of Graybar and Corning are on that, right? And we all put together this unbelievably white paper. Thank God I hired a copywriter to write it, so all the engineers, you don't have to read engineering typing. So it's really great, and it will come out at some particular point. And, I will say this, I would like to just tell you, when we're family and we're competitors, I'm going to go back to be the liaison of the supply chain group, and Ashley Travers of KGP will soon be taking that over. That's just a formality tomorrow in the boardroom. So we all work together, and I will support her, right? It is about teams and processes. And FBA also plays a role with every single operator. And I just really wanted to make sure you drive it home of what FBA does for you. It's not just public policy is always number one. There's no question. But all the committees, and please, if you want to engage, get with the FBA. So we have 15 seconds yet left. One thing I know they're happy, Jimmy and I switched. He was going to moderate, and I was going to say, I said, well, everyone wants to hear from network operators. So success there, right, for all of you. So with that said, a round of applause to you, Tom. Good luck in retirement, right?
Thank you.
Did it?
We're out.
We are out.
BBE, Broadband Energy.